Hundreds of years of tea drinking in Russia mean that there's 1,001 ways of consuming it, and yes, drinking tea with pickles is just one of them. Before the arrival of tea to 17th century Russia, people would drink various herbal infusions called Vzvar.
For different regions, these herbs were different. Some picked lime blossom, some picked mint, dried it and brewed it.
Fireweed or rose bay was one of the most popular infusions, and people still drink it today. Russian tea, Ivan chai. It's made from a plant with purple flowers that wildly grows all over the place. Unlike the warm-loving tea plant, Ivan chai happily survives the colder northern climes. Infusions were also made from dried sweet vegetables like carrots and also beets. By the 18th century, tea was becoming cheaper and more popular, but some remained cautious of the foreign drink. For one, the church was responsible. Orthodox priests called tea the devil's drink. But with time, they joined in on the tea party. Turned out that black tea was allowed during Lent and religious holidays. Lent is an integral part of Russian Orthodox culture. During fasting, one must go completely vegan and stay away from alcohol. Provided the circumstances, hot tea was a great source of energy and could be consumed in unlimited quantities during fasting. Fast forward to late 19th century, an image of an Orthodox priest drinking tea in the wild was a common sight. The only group of people who remain in opposition towards tea in Russia are the Old Believers, Orthodox Christians who refused to accept church reforms of the 17th century. Old Believers abstain from tea because it's not traditionally Russian, and they see tea and coffee as drugs.
At one time, the notorious Dal, the man who preserved a huge number of Russian proverbs for us, adages of the Russian language, wrote down a lot of Old Believer sayings, including those related to tea. For example, he who drinks tea, God will kill. He who drinks tea despairs from God. He who drinks coffee shackles Christ.
Tea culture peaked in its diversity in the 19th century. Every class and every region in Russia had their own way of drinking tea. Nobility drank tea very similar to the English aristocracy from delicate china, sometimes adding milk. They would also add sugar, imported from Europe, a luxury item of the time. Merchants were less refined and preferred showing off to good manners. Their rich tables were overflowing with tea, biscuits, jam, sweets and pastry. A merchant tea party could last for hours, with dozens of cuppers consumed per capita. To drink that much tea without brewing every single cup, Russians came up with zavarka. Zavarka is a tea concentrate brewed in a small teapot. It's very strong, at least 5 teaspoons of leaf tea to 2 cups of boiling water. This concentrate is then diluted with hot water from a larger kettle or the samovar. Adding fresh hot zavarka to hot water meant that the drink was often too hot to consume, so merchants started a fashion of drinking tea from a saucer. This Russian tradition still baffles tourists to the day, but mind you, it's frowned upon in society, seen as bad manners. It's okay for kids though. A popular misconception is that tea with lemon is the Russian way of drinking tea, that coachmen invented it to stave off nausea while driving. It's completely wrong. Coachmen did drink tea, but never with lemon.
Lemons were brought to Russia, preserved in salt, in barrels. They cost a lot of money. Most often alcoholic beverages were added to the tea. Tea with rum, tea with cognac. It was generally considered a product of a provincial official.
The most Russian way to drink tea is to have it with sweets and pastries. Tea on its own is called empty.
In the 18th and early 19th century, they drank tea with bagels and pickles. For example, red Chinese teas, not smoked. Many in taverns drank with pickles. Many added honey to various Chinese teas. If we take the second half of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, tea candy and tea biscuits appeared.
Tea was served everywhere in cities, in taverns and tea rooms. The tea house, or its eastern sister, the chikhana, grew into centers of attraction for city dwellers, forming a certain subculture. It was a place for business and pleasure meetings. Tea houses not only sold tea, but pastries and biscuits to go with, as well as cigarettes, stationery and press. Low-ranking officials and writers would base in tea houses, offering their services for a small fee. In Siberia, it was common to brew bricks of tea with butter, milk and salt. Leaf tea was too expensive for locals. Central Asian tea lovers drank it from pyala bowls, dipping flatbread into it. These bowls were introduced into the region since the reign of the Mongol Empire. A strong Turkish influence in the Caucasus led to the use of armudu drinking glasses, and sometimes salt was added for water retention, a much-needed trick in those dry, mountainous areas. Up until 1914, there were numerous ways to drink tea all across the Russian Empire, but World War I, the Revolution and the Civil War cut supplies. Tea first disappeared from provincial areas of Russia, but it wasn't long until then capital St. Petersburg followed suit.
In the 1930s, the tea industry in the Georgian Soviet Republic began to be supervised by the notorious Lavrentiy Beria. And thanks to his efforts, the number of plantations in Georgia increased very sharply. But it must be understood that this was only fulfilling the needs of urban areas. Only in the 1960s and 1970s did more or less high-quality tea in blends begin to appear in the cities.
Tea, albeit of lesser quality, made a comeback into the Russian home. Tea drinking habits and traditions have not changed much. Zavarka, samovar, sweets and fruit preserves still grace our tables when we sit down to drink tea. Tea after dinner, tea before bed. These little rituals are part of everyday existence here in Russia. A special place in all of this is tea after the banya, the Russian sauna. I mean, someone just beat the crap out of you with a bunch of branches and steaming heat, and there you are, half naked, red as a lobster, enjoying your tea. Brilliant. Modern public banyas have tea on offer for their clients to this day. These days, tea found steady competition in coffee. Coffee consumption is growing with the cafe industry. Just 10 years ago, coffee on the go was an alien concept in Russia. Now everyone's doing it, but even so, tea is miles ahead, so here's some tea versus coffee stats for you. Soviet love of tea had no limits, bordering on the absurd. Scientists from Turkmenistan came up with a device to brew tea using solar energy. Uzbek scientists created a sort of dome from insulated glass that brewed tea using solar heat. And I personally think these are awesome and how we're going to brew in the future, but everyone from the Northern Hemisphere is going to probably disagree, well, because polar nights. Drinking tea with pickles is just one of them. Coachman did drink tea, but never with lemon.